So, what are the most common? Can you give us three or four of the most common errors that lawyers make? I mean, you've done this 25 years and you've or longer, and you've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of lawyers. What are the ones that we can quickly fix right now? Three or four.
Um, so I'm going to give you a few that represent something quite typical, and not only typical, but often Microsoft Word won't catch it. And I usually give sentences that are not easy, because if they're too easy, it's a waste of everybody's time, because you would never make that mistake. And so, I'm not going to give you time like I would in a workshop. I'm just going to show you because we don't have the time. But in this case, the mistake is little used and small business. And so these are compound modifiers that are very often not picked up by Microsoft Word. And yet they're important, because it's not a little used argument, it's a little used argument. It's not a small business owner, it's a small business owner. And so those two words are working together to modify what follows, and that's why it's called a compound modifier, and it
Okay,
has to be hyphenated.
okay, interesting. And I'm sure business owners that aren't so tall would appreciate that hyphen.
Yeah, exactly. For
Go ahead.
example, I mean, and so it's clearer. No, it's not only correct, but it's clearer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we need
Another,
to, that's why I think that's why when I teach people that we need to dispense of the word grammar in the sense of I need to fix my grammar. Because what you have here is not a grammar mistake. You have a basically a semantics issue about meaning, is that people could wrongly interpret the meaning because of the punctuation that was not used with the vocabulary. So you have a combination of vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation all working together to make meaning out of that sentence for the intended audience. And I think that that's why a lot of people also get confused, is that they think it's grammar when in fact this is a punctuation and vocabulary interpretation error rather than an actual grammar error.
yeah, it's a clarity issue.
Yeah. Okay.
And often it's a mix of grammar, or let's say usage, and style. It's grammatically correct and stylistically superior, because it's clearer.
Great. Okay.
So,
Interesting example.
this is another great example of what we just said. In fact, this example and the next one are both good examples of not only being grammatically required but stylistically superior. So the answer to this question does not only cause controversy in China, but also in many other jurisdictions. And this mistake is one of the biggest ones I see. Even the US Supreme Court, I have examples from the US Supreme Court. So native speakers, not only non-native speakers, native speakers make this mistake a lot. In fact, almost all the mistakes I talk about are not unique to non-native English speakers. And in this case, the answer is not only in, but also in. We're talking about correlative conjunctions, especially dangerous, not only, but also. And what follows each of those conjunctions has to be the same part of speech, not only in, um, but also in. And again, grammatically correct, but stylistically superior, because it helps the reader compare, which is exactly what a correlative conjunction is doing. Not only China, but also other jurisdictions. And if you compare the blue to the red, it's a much easier read. It's just in terms of clarity to the reader. And so that's the other reason to do it, not just to be grammatically correct, but to help the reader. It's another way to follow the golden rule.
Okay, great. What are
And
you going to
then
surprise us with next?
this one is a little bit similar to the last one, And this is a mistake that Microsoft Word won't catch. Um, it's compared to the revision, it is a relatively big mistake. Fighting crime, fair hiring practices, and the protection of animals. Number one, it's unnecessarily difficult to understand. And number two, it sounds like you're fighting fair hiring practices. And so the meaning becomes convoluted. And if you look at the revision, the government has proposed laws aimed at fighting, protecting, promoting. And so every time you have a list, just like with a correlative conjunction, each item has to be the same part of speech. And that's grammatically required and stylistically superior because it helps the reader see, these are three parallel ideas because they're presented in a parallel construction or structure.
And this parallelism, this parallel construction that you're talking about, you can find this not only in English but in other languages and in rhetoric in general. I'm surprised that students aren't taught this in middle school, university. It's amazing to me how many lawyers I've come across that had never heard of the term parallelism or had understood the grammar behind this key feature of language. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. But it doesn't surprise me anymore because, lawyers haven't received any training in
Okay.
writing.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, you know, and this is something quite far down the list, because it's not only, like you said, it's not only a grammatical rule, but in terms of rhetoric, in terms of persuasive writing, it's a very powerful technique, using this parallelism that, where would they learn it? They're not going to learn it in law school, and they're not going to learn it in high school, and they're definitely not going to be taught it by a partner. And so they're never going to learn it unless they just get lucky and, read a book about it, or maybe they get lucky and they have a partner that's really, um, really dedicated to writing and dedicating to teaching writing. But that happens very rarely.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you though, when if you were lucky enough to take your workshop or lucky enough to have that partner, they would also show you in parallelism there's two ways to go about it. So one way that you've done is by adding these different verbs, uh or in the sense of fighting,
Yeah.
protecting, and promoting. But in the first one you had the single one, fighting. Could we rewrite the sentence where we had a single verb that covered those things?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how you do it. I mean, there's two ways to think about it. Each item has to follow naturally, grammatically from the lead in. That would be one way to, that would be one way to test whether it's parallel. So, for example, you could say the government has proposed laws aimed, or
Yeah,
okay,
we just
let's
changed
say
that word.
laws that fight crime, promote fair hiring, and protect animals. And so you take that lead in. The government has proposed laws that protect animals. Okay, it works. And
Yeah,
so
or you
each
could even say
item,
hire fairly, right? So, but the main thing is that you have the idea of the words being consistent and parallel. But what
yeah,
you've done is you've added new words to the sentence. What I'm asking you is that can we change that to where crime, the protect animals, and fair
yeah,
hiring practices all fit under a general umbrella term, like the original writer tried to do?
you could make it noun, so the blue is ing verb, ing verb, ing verb. The other one I gave you was infinitive verb, but you could also make it noun, noun, noun. Laws aimed at crime, you know unfair hiring practices, and the protection of animals.
There you
Again,
go. Right. So you could say aimed at, and then as long as this sentence makes logical sense, then it all of the list items fit under this same verb. But what you're saying is the key is how the word form is expressed. The word form is really key in the parallelism, isn't it? Because you have to fight crime, to protect animals, and to promote fair hiring practice, or you have fighting, protecting, and promoting. But the main change that he did there, if you notice, besides making sure the meaning made sense and didn't say we wanted to fight the protection of animals, is that he changed the word form and the word ending of that. Excellent. Okay, so those are three big things that we often see. Wow. And you know what? Thanks for the grammar lesson in this, because I know that everybody watching is really thankful for these things because now they
Josh,
can immediately apply.
let let me mention one other thing
Oh, great. We got one more.
that comes to mind. And again, this is why a usage edit is necessary, even if you're using software, because a lot of it is not necessarily required. It's not black and white, and so you need to think about it. Do I want to say, and you might actually repeat. You might break the golden rule, which is be as concise as possible. But if you break the golden rule for a reason, then it's fine. And you might, in order, rhetorical emphasis for persuasive effect, you might repeat the exact same first word in each item. So you could say the government has, implemented laws that fight crime, fight unfair hiring practices, and fight abusive animal practices. And so it's this repetition: fight, 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 and you're doing it for persuasive effect, to impress the reader with how important that word is. And but it's still parallel.